We're back on the Sports Zone. I am Mike Aglialoro. The 2014 NFL Draft is on May 8th, and so we're going to continue our series previewing division by division, each team's improvements thus far this offseason, and their team needs still to be addressed entering the draft. We've done the AFC and the NFC East. Jay Rovsky did the NFC North earlier in the week, and today we are going to look at the AFC North. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals won this division last year after the Baltimore Ravens suffered numerous losses and were unable to even make the playoffs coming off their championship season. Bengals, of course, have 3 straight seasons making the playoffs, which is in jeopardy this coming off season. We're going to get into that a little later. We're going to start at the bottom of this division with the dysfunctional Cleveland Browns. Browns last season had Rod Shazinski, their first-year head coach, and even though it was a 4-12 season, they never stopped playing for him. They always felt that a greater plan was coming after Trent Richardson was inexplicably traded earlier in the season for a first-round draft pick. That trade worked out decently, and all in all, with weapons Josh Gordon and Jordan Cameron emerging, it really looked like the Browns could be on the upswing. So it was very surprising when Rod Shazinski was suddenly fired early in the offseason. This, of course, led to a head coaching search that went on longer than any other teams in the league. They hired Mike Pettine, former defensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills, after getting shut out of every big-name head coaching candidate to that point. And then a month later, they fired their general manager, Mike Lombardi, and replaced him with Ray Farmer, former director of pro personnel for the Kansas City Chiefs for the last 10 years. So with that, they entered the offseason, and right off the bat, they cut defensive leader DeQuell Jackson in a cost-saving move and entered the free agency period among the league leaders in available cap space. So right off the bat, they also lost T.J. Ward to free agency to the Denver Broncos. They replaced these two players with Carlos Dansby and Dante Whitner, and by all accounts, those are 2 downgrades in both directions. They were able to sign the running back they wanted in Ben Tate, formerly of the Houston Texans, to a 2-year contract. They did sign restricted wide receiver Andrew Hawkins, formerly of the Cincinnati Bengals, to an offer sheet that the Bengals wouldn't match. And they did add former Detroit Lions wide receiver Nate Burleson in. And these are 2 really good third wide receiving options. And they were able to match the offer sheet that the Jacksonville Jaguars made to center Alex Mack. But right now they enter this season with Brian Hoyer penciled in as quarterback coming off of his ACL injury, as they did release Jason Campbell and Brandon Whedon. They are in a good position because as much as they've been visiting with Johnny Manziel over the last few days, and it does look like they could go quarterback in the first spot, they do have 3 picks of the top 33 in the NFL draft. So they could go quarterback in the first round, they could go later in the first round, or early in the second round, depending on where they think a guy like Derek Carr is going to fall. They have a lot of different ways to go because you still need a viable number 2 option to play opposite Josh Gordon. And they have been rumored to be looking at some of the wide receivers like Mike Evans and some of the other guys available as well. They do have needs along the defensive side. As I said, they did downgrade from DeQuell Jackson to Carlos Dansby and T.J. Ward to Dante Whitner. So you have to figure they'll be looking to reinforce that entire front 7 and a little bit in the secondary to give all-pro cornerback Joe Hayden a little bit of help. And another running back to platoon with Ben Tate is probably not the worst thing in the world for Cleveland either. But they're still very entrenched in that bottom spot, and they got a long way to go. We'll move to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers missed the playoffs this past season, and in this offseason, they lost Emmanuel Sanders to the Denver Broncos, which they were prepared to do because they were very confident in second-year man Marcus Wheaton to take his spot. But they've also lost a lot of veteran leadership and experience on the defensive side of the football, with Ziggy Hood going to the Jacksonville Jaguars, Ryan Clark leaving for the Washington Redskins, and they cut Lamar Woodley, the linebacker, and saw him go to the Oakland Raiders, while also losing defensive linemen Al Woods and Brent Kessel as well. So they are in a position where they really need to keep going younger on the defensive side. They did give Jason Whirls, the defensive end, a transition tag, which he accepted. But you got to figure they'll be looking to add to the linebacking core and the secondary. And they may want to add another wide receiver in case Wheaton isn't up to the job. They did add Lance Moore and Darius Haywood-Bay in the third to compete for the third wide receiver spot. So they're not terrible there. And they did replace Jonathan Dwyer with LeGarrette Blount to be a backfield mate with the young Levon Bell, who had a big second half when he came back off of his injury. And as always, they'll be looking to improve an offensive line that just does not protect Ben Roethlisberger. So with that, we'll move to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals, like I said, won the division last year, took advantage of a weak Baltimore team after all their losses in the offseason, and they went to an 11-5 record and made the playoffs for the third straight season. This offseason, they lost their offensive coordinator, Jay Gruden, to be head coach of the Washington Redskins. They lost their defensive coordinator, Mike Zimmer, to be head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. And they lost their top defensive lineman, Michael Johnson, as he went via free agency to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, along with offensive tackle Anthony Collins. So they're hurting in a lot of different areas. They're going to be replacing the coordinators with Hugh Jackson on the offensive side of the football and Paul Gunther on the defensive side of the football. And they will be getting defensive tackle Geno Atkins and linebacker Emmanuel Lamar back from season-ending injuries. So that is definitely going to help the unit. But you got to figure they're going to look for help on the offensive line to help what is a dynamic offense with lead wide receiver A.J. Green. And you saw what Giovanni Bernard and Ben Jarvis Green-Ellis could do out of the backfield last season. Andy Dalton is going to need to step up big time this season. And Cincinnati may want to look to add another wide receiver in the draft, but they're going to, one way or another, they're going to want to give Dalton every possible reason to succeed this year. You got to beef up that offensive line, maybe add another wide receiver. And on the defensive side of the football, they're going to want to add at least one defensive end or linebacker to replace Michael Johnson, and they're going to want to upgrade their secondary as well. And last, we're going to move to the team that, in my opinion, so far, has definitely improved the most this offseason, just by not losing as many players as they lost last season, the Baltimore Ravens. Unlike last season, they were able to resign a lot of players, starting with their left tackle, Eugene Monroe, who was one of the top 5 tackles on the board at the beginning of the free agency, and they were able to sign him early. They did trade for a center from Tampa Bay, Jeremy Zuda, so they feel they've definitely improved that offensive line. But the big moves for these guys, not just re-signing linebacker Darryl Smith, who did an admirable job of replacing Ray Lewis last season, bringing back tight end Dennis Pitta, who, of course, he was lost on the injury. They were able to make the big signing and bring in Steve Smith, who is going to fill a huge void that was created when they traded Anquan Bolden last season. And they did add another tight end in the underrated Owen Daniels. So that offense is definitely much improved, in spite of the fact that we don't know if Ray Rice will be starting the season as an active player in light of everything that's gone on with his domestic violence incident. So you got to figure Baltimore will probably be looking to add a running back or two in case the worst happens with Rice. They'll probably be looking to upgrade their right side of the offensive line, particularly the tackle. And I do see them looking to upgrade their defensive line, as they did lose Arthur Jones, the big defensive end, to the Indianapolis Colts. And they'll probably be looking to upgrade their safety position after they lost James Ahedebo to the Detroit Lions. So, just to recap, the Browns are still at the bottom of this division. Steelers got a lot of work to do as well. Cincy's taken a step back, and I look for Baltimore to reclaim the division next season. Check out everything on ThisIsSportsZone.com. We got the latest from the 2014 NFL Draft preview by Jake Dixon. Coming soon, we'll be looking at the tight ends and the wide receivers as we switch to the offense. Tom Lumbo and Jay Rovsky preview the playoffs, and the Nets took a early 1-0 series lead over the Toronto Raptors. You got Tom Lumbo's look at the top 10 boxing matches for the rest of the year, and you got other opinion pieces by Dave Tice, George Murphy, and others as well. Like us on Facebook, check us out on Twitter at WeAreSportsZone. Send us any questions and comments you have. Have a happy Easter, folks. Happy holidays. For this is SportsZone. Thanks for watching. I am Mike Aglialoro, and we will see you next time, folks.